Hello everyone, Lord here, and welcome to another Shadowverse video. In this one, I'm going to be talking about the new expansion, Dawnbreak Nightedge, and giving my first blush thoughts on the upcoming cards. I've been somewhat out of the loop recently, so this will legitimately be the first time I'm reading most of these. So, without further ado, let's dive straight in and look at the 97 initial cards we are getting. We've got a lot of ground to cover. So, we will be looking at the official gallery for the cards themselves, one part because a lot of the community websites have not been updated yet, and one part because the actual viewing mode is made with the new choose mechanic in mind. Anyway, let's go down the list. Forestcraft, first legendary, Yggdrasil. So, Yggdrasil puts either a Blessing of Creation or Wrath of Nature into your hand. She has Drain. The Blessing draws cards and adds cards to the number of cards played, and the Wrath gives somebody +1 power rush or gives everybody Storm. So this seems like a very interesting card. I think this is a very good poster child for the choose mechanic. So there's a lot of ways you can go with this one. You can just play her out, give her Wrath of Nature, and she will effectively trade into a small minion. You can get the Wrath of Nature, save it for a later turn, and blow somebody out with the Enhance. You can get Blessing of Creation, and for example, in Unlimited, you could use it to get an incredibly powerful Roach play. Overall, this seems like a very flexible card. I can't immediately, off the top of my head, think of exactly what deck it fits into. I'm not much of a Forestcraft player, but I think this card will for sure see some play, even if it doesn't find a more permanent place in some deck. I think that a lot of people will be definitely trying out this card, and there's a lot of different situations in which it can be decent or it can be interesting. So definitely a card to look out for. White Vanara Ward. If his attack or defense is increased by spell effect, evolve his follower and he becomes a Stormer. So his stats don't increase when he gets evolved. He does gain Storm, which is important, I suppose, but I suppose this will find a place in that one deck which runs buff effects, and I forget the names of the cards because I actually do not think I've seen that deck in some time. Basically, all the Forestcraft decks I meet for some reason are neutral or control forest, go figure. But I think this might find a spot in that deck, the one that plays buff effects and the one follower which draws you cards when it's buffed, and the one follower which, when it's played, it gains ambush until the end of the opponent's turn. So most likely this is in addition to that deck. Honestly, I don't see this making too big of a splash, just because that deck is kind of an underdog, and I don't think that this one card can make it better than the neutral or control forest archetypes which are currently available and more popular. Swiftgate Okami. When you play another follower, give it Storm, they return his follower to your hand. So this feels like an incredibly powerful card to have if you can make sure it sticks on the board for a turn. So Forestcraft can play some really big followers. So this is a 5. A very obvious interaction would be Beauty and the Beast on 6, hitting the opponent for 9, I believe, with the Evolve. However, you need this to actually survive, and it's a 5 play point 4/4, so I'm not sure. Again, not much of a forest expert, but this doesn't seem that useful. Maybe I'm missing a super obvious interaction with something extremely easy to play, but it feels like this card only works if it stays in play by itself for one turn, and it doesn't have any way to protect itself. You still need to evolve it in order to gain tempo on the turn you play it, if it's turn 5, assuming. I guess maybe in the late game, on turn 10, you played this with something else that costs 5 or less, which is super powerful, but I just can't think of that card off the top of my head, the card that makes this combination incredibly good. Paula, Icy Warmth. If at least other cards are played, and you have at least 2 play points, you can either play this as a Paula Gentle Warmth or a Paula Passionate Warmth. So this is what I was talking about with the easy interface, by the way. You notice this in Yggdrasil as well, but it's very easy to check the different modes on the website. So, if at least 2 other cards were played, and you have at least 2 play points. So I'm assuming that basically this means if it's turn 4 or later. So we can get either a return allied follower amulet into your hand, okay, or a deal 1 damage to an enemy follower. So we either get a discounted Angel of the Word, I guess somewhat worse than Angel of the Word, but a discounted Angel of the Word, or a return effect, which I suppose might be very powerful with certain cards. Again, this somewhat feels like a combination play you want to do on a late turn. Again, I'm thinking of Unlimited. This can return roaches, which would be amazing, but again, roach is not in rotation, and I do think of rotation kind of first and foremost at this point, so not seeing the incredible explosive potential here. It's a good card, though. I mean, it'll probably see play, just because it's, again, most of these cards which have the choose keyword, they're just flexible. They can be used in a variety of situations, so even if each one of their single forms is not exceptionally good, just being able to choose between them so as to kind of fit into 2 different situations will probably get them a spot in a lot of lists. So probably a card to watch out for as well, just because it's somewhat flexible. And it's a 2-play point 2/2. Like, worst case scenario, I mean, seems pretty good. It's a 2-mana Angel of the Word. Seems good. Fashionista Nelka, I suppose. So she either gives you an angel's dress or a demon's dress. Okay. So the angel's dress buffs somebody, and the demon's dress curses somebody. Wasn't this effect called something curse? Isn't there like a corset card which does exactly this? Let's see. So again, just because she has the choose keyword, I believe that she almost automatically has some chance of seeing play. Her stats aren't exceptionally good, but she does have the right orientation of stats. That is to say, she has a higher toughness than she has power. So it actually has a decent chance of seeing play. But I'm thinking more of a somewhat good stuff Forestcraft deck. I'm not sure if there's space for this card in the current neutral or control forest lists. So if there is a good stuff forest deck, like a tempo forest or something of the sort, then this card will probably see play there. But I don't think I can see a spot for this card in the current 2 dominating builds. Still, pretty interesting card, pretty good. Forest Whispers. So you transform somebody into a fairy and you get a fairy. So this is Forestcraft's spin on Fall from Grace. However, it only works on followers. Doesn't Forest already sometimes run Fall from Grace? I don't remember, but I believe that Forest either runs Fall from Grace in one deck or doesn't run Fall from Grace just because it doesn't have the spots to accommodate it. So if a Forestcraft deck is not running Fall from Grace, I think that they will not run Forest Whispers. Basically what I'm trying to say is I think this card is worse than Fall from Grace just because it doesn't affect amulets. And I think most people were playing Fall from Grace to avoid being blown out by amulets. So 4 mana, just generic removal, doesn't feel that good. I mean, for 5 mana you can kill minions typically. So for 1 discount, you get to transform them instead, and you also put a fairy into your hand. I suppose it can be good against certain followers if those kinds of decks come out on top at some point. So for example, decks which are centered around Last Words followers or followers which have repeated effects or are hard to remove. So this can transform, again, Unlimited, it can transform Mordecai the Duelist. More relevant in rotation, it could transform Dark Alice. But if you're going to do those things, I think that you'll be better served again by running Fall from Grace, because you'll not only be able to transform those things, but you'll also be able to transform the amulets, which, for example, Dragon runs. So, not a bad card, but I think that Fall from Grace is just better. Owlman. So, he has no text, but he can be enhanced to gain Ambush. So again, I believe this is in addition to that one deck that I don't know if it has a name, but the one deck that has the fanfare guy who gains Ambush, and you play a bunch of buff effects and try to really cheese your opponent in the most dishonorable way. I believe this is another addition to this. So between this and the legendary, I mean, it might increase in popularity. I still don't think that this is a kind of archetype you want to support by giving it cards, but Apparently Cygames thinks otherwise. Not a bad card, but I think it will only be played in that one deck. Elf General, so 4/3/4, ward, and gives you a fairy. I mean, it's not bad, but which deck wants this card? Looks like a good arena card, but I don't think this will be seen constructed play. I just can't think of the deck that wants a 4-mana 3/4 ward and a fairy that much. So, alright, arena card, don't think it'll see constructed play. Grasshopper Conductor. Put a random follower with X attack from your deck into your hand, execute the number of cards played this turn, including this card. So, this is Forestcraft's take on, I guess, Goblin Mage, because this will basically do the job of Goblin Mage, since you can kind of manipulate it to find specific things. Again, I'm thinking of Rhinoceroach, simply because just playing this guy with nothing else will give you a 1 attack follower, and Rhinoceroach, guess what, 1 attack. I guess this is a good addition to Unlimited for rotation. Actually, I suppose it can find King Elephant, because it's also a 1 attack minion, a follower rather. So this might actually see play in the control build, which runs King Elephant. Although, again, when it comes to the control and neutral forest builds, I'm not sure how many free spots they have for cards like this, because this card is okay-ish because of its effect. Its stats are pretty horrendous. Like, it gets destroyed very easily. So you're basically playing this card for the effect, and I'm not sure that finding King Elephant on turn 3 or whenever in exchange for 3 mana is worth it, considering that you can play a card for 3 mana, which draws you 2 cards. And I believe somebody did the math, but if you draw a specific number of cards over the course of the game, your chance of seeing King Elephant is very high. So, I mean, I guess this guarantees it, but I don't know. I don't think it'll see much play, simply because it feels somewhat overcosted. If it costs 2, wow, it'd be great. But at 3, skeptical. Would be interesting what people come up with, though. This is yet another tutor effect. So maybe somebody can make a super consistent deck with all these tutors. Servant of the Spellgrove. So when he attacks, the enemy follower that he attacked loses the ability to attack on the next turn. I'm gonna go with no. So I have this pseudo rating system. It's called the 3B system. So you have Bust, Builder, and Bomb, with Bust being pretty much a bad card, Bomb being a over-the-curve card, so typically an overpowered card, and Builder being the majority of cards, solid cards, which can see some play, require some build around, and, you know, just decent cards all around. Most cards that Shadowverse has in general are builders, in fact, which is great because it means that Cygames has a reasonably good idea of how to make cards not fall into one of 2 polar zones. But I would say that this card is definitely a bust. This feels like a card you would play pretty much only in Arena. I don't see the appeal to this card at all. If your opponent has a big follower, you basically have to suicide this into it to stop it from attacking. I guess it can save you, but no, it just feels bad. It looks bad, it feels bad, and they should feel bad for making this. Flower of Fairies. It's an interesting name. Countdown 2, fanfare, draw a card. Last words, put a Fairy Wisp into your hand. Put a Fairy Wisp into your hand if this amulet is returned to your hand. So a Fairy Wisp is a 0-cost 1/1 follower, which has the fanfare banish this follower if at least 2 other cards were played this turn. So in effect, this gives you a 0-cost follower that you can play for either additional Rhinoceroach power, which I believe that most of Forestcraft for the longest time has boiled down to how big can I get my Rhinoceroach. And that might still be the case in Unlimited, but again, I'm talking mostly about rotation. So in terms of rotation, what can you do with a Fairy Wisp? Well, it does feed your hand for things like King Elephant. It is a 0-cost follower, which is kind of never bad, but yeah, I mean, this looks pretty okay. It gives you a card, it gives you another card with the last words. It seems okay. Again, not sure the current big 2 meta decks have spots for this kind of card, because again, it does seem okay-ish, but it doesn't feed into their strategy. It doesn't help it in any particular way. It's just a decent card on its own, but those decks, I'm not sure they have any spots for just decent cards. They, I think, at this point, actively want cards which help their strategy evolve. So, decent card. It's probably great in Arena, by the way. It might be decent in that one deck again, or in some strange Forestcraft deck outside of the 2 meta decks. But as is, it's an okay card. Just it probably won't see play in the meta decks, but it might see play in some other deck. Maybe we'll see some other decks. Alright, moving on. Let's look at Swordcraft. Sky Fortress. Oh my, is this the meme fortress? Let's see. So, 8 mana, already a bad sign. But it has Rush, like every Swordcraft follower ever. Okay. Give an allied follower +3/+4. If it's an officer, it gets ward. If it's a commander, it gets draw a card. First thoughts, it's okay. It actually looks pretty good, maybe even? Simply because buff effects in Shadowverse are somewhat at a premium. It's got that going for it. It does give ward for a clutch moment. It does have Rush by itself, which means that you don't need to necessarily use an evolve point on the turn it comes down, since it can, I mean, at 5/6, it can pretty reliably contest the board by itself. So it might not be a bad addition to some Swordcraft decks. In fact, now that I think about it, it might have a spot in the current mid-range sword list. Yep, overall the card seems pretty good. It's not busted or overpowered by any means, but it looks like a pretty solid card. I think it will see play. In fact, I think most definitely it'll see play, just because it just ticks all the Swordcraft things. It has Rush, it has a decent body, it gives somebody strength, it has officer interaction. So probably it'll see play. Not sure how good it will be, but probably it'll see play. Sky Commander Celia. So a 2 for 2/2 that can transform into 2 different things. So even without looking at what the options are, I'm probably going to say that she's going to be pretty decent. Let's see what she does. So she either gives you 2 friends, a Shield Guardian and a Heavy Knight. For reference, the Shield Guardian is a 1/1 ward, and the Heavy Knight is, I believe, a 1/2. Not ward. Or a Celia Despair's Messenger, which has Storm and gains power, and then she returns all other allied followers to your hand. Yeah, this card is probably going to be played in pretty much every sword deck forever. Simply looking at her baseline, she is a 2 mana 2/2 commander, which without any text at all is already decent. Well, maybe not for a legendary, but if she was a silver and she was a 2 mana 2/2 commander, she'd probably be still played in some decks like Support Cannon. But she is a 2 mana 2/2 that has 2 different modes, one of which has Storm, which obviously Swordcraft absolutely loves. Not to mention she enables you to replay Stormers by returning them to hand. But she also has a secondary mode which can help out decks like Control Sword, if that even survives this expansion. But she can help out Control Sword by giving them additional bodies on the board. She can also just help out mid-range by giving additional bodies, which can later be buffed by something. Let's say the meme ship right here. But yeah, she just seems really good overall. She does a lot of things. There's almost no opportunity cost. Like, again, worst case scenario, she's a 2-play .22, which is not the worst thing. So she's not understated in any of her forms. Even in this one, 2/4 is very good as a stat line. So this card is absolutely great. It's not busted, but it'll definitely be played, I believe, in pretty much every sword deck forever until she rotates. Simply because there's nothing bad about her, and she does give you a bunch of upsides. Innocent Princess Prim. Ambush. Oh, I really don't like that keyword. Fanfare, enhance 8. She gains +3/+3, and she gives you a Nanja Silent Maid, and changes its cost to 0. So I believe that's another new card, so I'm actually going to have to see what Nanja does before evaluating this. So Nanja is a 2/3 ward that gets Bane if an allied commander is in play. So I assume Prim is a commander, Yes, she is. So option number 1, it's a 2-mana 1/3 ambush, which is not great. She is no Pepe. Not at all. Best case scenario, you play her for 8. She is a 4/6, and she gives you a 0-cost 2/3 ward with Bane. So assuming you play them both in the same turn, that's 6/9 worth of stats for 8 mana, and one of them has Bane. I guess that's not bad, but it just feels very inflexible. Her non-enhanced state feels somewhat weak. Her enhanced state feels okay, but it's gonna eat up your whole turn, and that just doesn't feel like a really good turn 8 play. I mean, even compared to something like playing Sky Fortress, like Sky Fortress feels much more impactful immediately, so I don't think this girl is gonna be that popular. I might be completely wrong, but I'm not feeling it, not at all. She does have really good stats when evolved, but I mean, that's just not enough to make her playable. I mean, she's a gold. She is a commander, which is pretty much the only thing she has going for her, but again, if we're going to go for cheap commanders, we already saw Celia, which I feel is just a better commander, so why bother with this girl? I don't think she's that good. Chromatic Duel. So we can either add a Queen Chimera the White or a Queen Magnus the Black. Magnus? Alright. Or for enhanced 6, we can add both, I suppose, and recover 6 play points. Interesting. So if you play this card normally, you get one of the 2 queens, but if you pay 6 for this card, you get both queens, and you basically get your play points back. Okay, let's see what the queens do. So Queen Chimera the White is a rush follower that summons a knight when she attacks. Well, that is actually a pretty decent effect. And Queen Magnus says that all allied followers can't be damaged by spells and effects until the end of the opponent's next turn. That's not bad, I suppose. Chimera does seem somewhat better than Magnus, though. Just simply because Chimera helps you contest the board and build the board, whereas Magnus helps you protect your board. But Sword is not really known for being able to keep its board very well, and I don't think this will fix that issue. Still, this seems like a very interesting card. It is obviously exponentially more powerful at 6 than it is at 1, but again, it's a choose card. It'll very likely see play simply due to the flexibility of its effect, although I don't think either of these are exceptionally spectacular. However, again, it's just a matter of flexibility. This card can help you out of a tight spot, and this card can protect your board, so simply having the option to have both of these on call for basically 0 play points may be very beneficial to decks like mid-range Swordcraft or another deck which wants to build up a board very quickly or protect an already built board. So it'll most likely see play, but I'm not sure it'll see play in the popular Swordcraft decks. I think maybe there will be a different Swordcraft deck which may run this card. These are commanders, worth noting, so support cannon maybe? I guess we'll see. Okay, we already saw Nonja, but she actually seems pretty okay. She's a 3-mana 2/3 ward with potentially Bane. It reminds me a lot of the one of the Serpent Sisters from Bloodcraft. She just seems okay. I'm not sure she's going to fit into any of the current Swordcraft decks, but she seems okay. She probably will find the spot if a more commander-centric deck is being run. Maybe support cannon? At this point, I'm going to have to stop chalking up all the meh cards which just interact with commanders or are commanders to support cannon, but still. This card seems like a pretty good arena card, though, so I don't know. I don't think it'll see much constructed play, outside of being summoned by the other lady, perhaps, if she sees play. Valse, Magical Marksman. So he can either give you a Holy Pure Bomb or a Fatal Spell Bomb. So first glance, 3-mana 2/2 officer. Well, he's going to have to give something pretty decent. So Holy Pure Bomb. Oh, I believe this card had a controversy with its art. Yes, I believe so. Anyway, Holy Pure Bomb, banish enemy follower or amulet. That is pretty great It is, of course, costed at the baseline for this kind of effect, but that is pretty great. Having that effect in Swordcraft, pretty great. Fatal Spell Bomb, destroy an enemy follower with 3 defense or less for 1 play point. That actually seems pretty damn good. I'm not sure exactly which deck wants to run this guy, but I'm pretty sure some deck is going to run this guy simply because the options he offers are actually extremely good, and you're not paying that much for it. So again, if we look at the baseline, a 2/2 follower would usually cost 2 play points. So basically you're paying about 1 play point, slightly over, but around 1 play point to get one of these 2 cards, and both of these cards are actually pretty good, especially this one. This one can help you win some basically unwinnable matchups. So this guy's definitely going to see play. Not going to say he's a bomb, but for a silver card, this guy is exceptionally good, in my opinion. Savage Swordsman, 3/1. Oh, not liking this. Fanfare enhance 8, gain +4/+4, and rush. So become a 7/5. 8 mana, 7/5 rush? No. No. I don't like this guy. He seems like a pretty decent arena card, because he has 2 different modes. So the 2 playpoint mode and the 8 playpoint mode, but for constructed, probably not. 1 toughness / 1 health minions, which have a very small upside that is just flexibility and not actual power. Gonna go with no. Frontline Ramparts. Oh, a Swordcraft Amulet. If there are fewer ally followers than enemy followers in play, summon a Heavy Knight. At the end of your opponent's turn, summon a Heavy Knight. So this will summon you a bunch of Heavy Knights. I believe there was a Swordcraft deck which was all about playing Heavy Knights. Perhaps this card is exactly for that deck. As is, I can't see this card actually being played in any other kind of deck. So the popular Swordcraft decks, aggro, mid-range, control, I don't think they will run this card. Ever. Moving on. Master Samurai. 2/3, and he can become enhanced to become a 4/5 that can attack twice per turn. Ooh. Attacking twice per turn is very powerful, but I think these stats are probably not enough. That's a 6 mana 4/5. Yeah, it can attack twice, but it can be killed by a 4-cost follower or lower. So, interesting card. I'm actually looking forward to somebody coming up with a super janky deck that involves this guy and buff effects. So making this guy huge and attacking twice per turn. But I think that perhaps we already had something better than this guy in the form of Old Man and Old Woman. Yes, they had to be evolved, but they did also have Bane. And this guy doesn't really have anything going for him. Played on curve, he's pretty bad. Played with his enhance, he's pretty bad unless you evolve him so you can get the benefit right away. Yeah, if you buff him, he becomes exponentially more powerful, but at this point we're relying on running a card which we need to play at 6 because it sucks otherwise, and we're waiting for another card to buff it, and yeah, it just becomes too much work at that point. I mean, we're looking for consistently powerful cards, and this just doesn't seem to fit the profile, at least in my eyes. Holy Bear Knight. Oh joy. Porcupines, bears. Oh yes. Looking forward to the Swordcraft Zoo deck. Quite literally. So a 2/2 ward. Okay, that's pretty fair. Enhance 5, gain +2/+2. This looks very vanilla, but so did the oh man, I'm forgetting all these old cards. The core Swordcraft card, which had the same text but without the enhance, and it actually was played for the longest time, I believe. So this guy will actually probably see play in the control sword build simply because they need cheap wards. I'm not sure if there's any other wards in this set or in the upcoming cards, but this seems just like a pretty good inclusion simply because they were running the other card before, and this is just pretty much a straight up better version of that card. So Probably we'll see playing Control Sword, but maybe, maybe not. The other builds, I don't think they care about this card that much. Axe Princess. 1 mana, 1/1. Oh boy. Whenever you play a card using its enhance effect, draw a card. And she's a commander. Okay. I was just about to say she seems pretty mediocre, but she's a commander. Is it support? No. No. I'm gonna stop just relegating every commander card to the support cannon build. She seems okay. I mean, I'm probably missing something, some kind of commander interaction, which is super easy. I mean, just being a 1 play point follower is typically pretty decent because, for example, aggro decks want more of those, so maybe it'll see play there. In terms of the popular builds, though, I don't know, I'm not seeing it. So you need to play her, she needs to stay on the board, because most likely you'll need to wait a turn to play the enhance effect. Or you could, I guess, keep her in your hand and then play her along with an enhance card. But at that point, why are you even running her if you're only drawing 1 card? Because if you just played the other card in the place of Axe Princess, you would have gotten it anyway. So it just seems a bit... Maybe I'm missing a super cheap enhance effect, like the enhanced deck, perhaps, is what I'm missing, but I'm not seeing it. Basically, her only redeeming quality in my eyes is that she's a commander, and I don't think it's enough, not at this point. Okay, we're moving on to Runecraft, apparently. Unbodied Witch. Well, that's a freaky evolved art. Okay, so 9 mana, 4/4. Oh, this is going to have a big effect, isn't it? Ward. Good start. Choose a card in your hand and put copies of it into your hand until it's full. At the start of your turn, evolve this follower. So when it gets evolved, whenever this follower attacks, spell boost the cards in your hand 10 times. Interesting. So if you can just spend an evolve point normally and get the 10 spell boosts immediately. This card seems like it does a little bit too much. It has absolutely dreadful stats for its cost, but so does Word Wielder Ginger. And this is pretty much on the same level, where she has a potential huge upside, but for this card, at least when compared to Ginger, this card has a much more kind of easy to see deck in which it fits in. You could always fill your hand with just a super powerful card that is 1 use. You could always just play it in a spell boost deck to get like a huge amount of spell boosts. This card will very likely see play in some decks. I'm not sure what deck will end up being its like permanent home. However, it'll definitely see play, at least to some degree, simply because it does a lot of things. So it provides you with additional copies of cards and it does spell boost. And both those things on their own are pretty valuable. So we'll definitely see play. Also, what is going on in that evolved art? Seriously. Rooney, Destiny's Bard. So she can either give us a Prophecy of Boons or a Prophecy of Doom. And whenever she attacks, she spell boosts the cards in her hand. So what are the prophecies? So Prophecy of Boons draws us cards, and if it's been spell boosted at least 5 times, recover 2 play points. So if it's been spell boosted, it's free. Okay. Prophecy of Doom, give the enemy leader... Oh, what? 15? Okay, sure. Hold on there, Dimension Shift. Give the enemy leader the following effect. At the end of your turn, deal 7 damage to your leader, and subtracting from the cost of this card. So she basically gives us a new rotation take on Dimension Shifts, because basically she would be at the core of a Dimension Shift deck, except instead of Dimension Shift, we would be running Prophecy of Doom as the ultimate card we want to use. Now, thinking more about this card will definitely see play. In fact, this card, as I said, will most likely create its own archetype. So instead of Dimension Shift, we're going to be seeing the era probably of Prophecy of Doom decks, since she seems somewhat more consistent, because additional copies of her can not only give you more Prophecies of Doom, but they can give you Prophecy of Boons if you already have enough Prophecies of Doom in your hand. And her stats are not as bad as one would expect, considering that she spell boosts cards when she attacks, which is another added upside. Well, this card definitely looks to be one of the more played, more popular, more meta-defining cards in this upcoming set. So look out for her, look out for Prophecy of Doom, because I have a feeling that you're going to be seeing a lot of this girl and her prophecies. Snowman King. Ooh. So it's a 7 mana 2/3. Okay. You can either summon a Snow Knight or a Wild Snowman. And if you spell boost, you can summon more. Okay, color me intrigued. So the Snow Knights are snowmen with ward. Well, bigger snowmen with ward. And the Wild Snowmen have Storm. Interesting. Is this going to be the new pseudo-meme Conjuring Force deck? Because I'm sure you're all aware, but Conjuring Force Snowmen used to be a thing back in the day, and I feel that this card was made to kind of fill the same niche. On the other hand, this card seems pretty decent on its own, even without vicious memery, simply because the Snow Knights are a pretty decent deterrent to attacks, so you only need to boost this guy 4 times, and he will summon basically a board full of warders, basically a better Otohime, a much better Otohime. So not sure which deck this guy might slot into. I don't think there's a deck currently that would slot this guy in, but if a deck appears which would need this kind of effect, filling the board with multiple warders or simply producing a large amount of bodies, which are better than, for example, the normal snowmen that come out of Conjure Snow, then this guy will definitely have a home in that deck. The card is pretty decent, just not sure where it will be played as of right now. Absolute Zero Blade. Destroy an enemy follower with 2 defense or less, draw a card if an evolved allied follower is in play, and spell boost draw a follower with 1 more defense. Okay, well this is basically going to be a staple forever. Wow. Okay, way to give us a better Wind Blast. Alright. Yeah, this card will probably see vast amounts of play in pretty much most Runecraft decks that I can think of. Okay, maybe not Burn, I'm not sure, but this just seems like a very solid card. It's a Wind Blast with an added draw if you have an evolved follower, and it starts at 2 defense instead of 1, which is Wind Blast, and in general it just seems pretty good. It is less efficient than Wind Blast because it costs 3 play points instead of 2, but it just seems like a pretty good card. I'm thinking this will definitely see play. If there is a deck which would run Wind Blasts, then it will run this card. Summoning Drills. 4 mana amulet, countdown 3, and it summons a Guardian Golem and then summons a Scrap Golem. Pretty interesting. The card itself is pretty decent, I would say. However, it seems to be tailored towards 1, Arena, and 2, an actual Earthright deck. And no, Burn Rune does not count as an Earthright deck. And I'm not sure any of those are around currently. I mean, we have already seen the 2 legendaries for Runecraft. We've seen the golds. And I did not see any Earthright support. So I'm not sure this card by itself is enough to make Earthright a thing again. So I'm going to say that this card is pretty good, but it'll probably see absolutely no play simply because I don't think there's anybody who actually needs this kind of effect. Perhaps some Rune deck which is very slow and wants to get to the late game, but I'm not seeing it. If you're running a spell boost deck with the Embodied Witch, for example, I would be thinking that you would run just straight up removal instead of trying to ward yourself up. So this is a pretty good card, but I think we're going to have to wait to see the resurgence of Earthright Rune. Elusa, Magic Wonderkind. So unevolved, she does nothing. However, when you evolve her, she summons an Imperial Mammoth and gives it Rush. And he gets banished at the start of your next turn, and if you have Earthright, it gets Ward. Oh, that's pretty interesting. So this feels like a better version of the core set mid-game fighter cards. So, for example, Floral Fencer or other similar cards which are made to contest the early evolve turns. This feels very much like that, except it has its base body is much worse. However, the swing it can potentially give you seems much higher because the Imperial Mammoth is quite large, but she gains no stats from the evolve. This is pretty interesting. I'm not sure there's a Rune deck which wants to run this, but if a good stuff or tempo-ish kind of Rune deck comes up at some point, then this card might be in it. It seems pretty good to swing the tempo in your favor when you're losing on the board. However, again, with the current Rune decks, I don't see where it will fit in. The card itself is good, though. The card itself is pretty good. Mysterian Wormist. So 2 play points, 2/2. If you have at least 6 play points, you can play him as a Mysterian White Worm or a Mysterian Black Worm. So the White Worm gives us a Mysterian Circle and makes all Mysterious spells cycle. Okay? And the Mysterian Black Worm gives us Mysterian Missiles and makes all Mysterious spells deal 1 to the enemy's face. This seems pretty interesting. It actually seems very comparable to what Celia does. So very similar numbers, very similar kind of impact, very similar kind of flexibility. So the White Worm gives us 1/2 of the Mysteria spells, and the Black Worm gives us the other half of the Mysteria spells. And it makes the Mysteria spells, it gives us significantly better. So typically, if you're looking for circles, you want to draw, and if you're looking for missiles, you want to deal damage. Since typically missiles is better for burn, and circle is better for, let's say, Earthright Rune or some other kind of defensive plays. This guy seems pretty interesting. I'm not sure if Burn Rune has the space for this guy, since you need to get 6 play points to actually turn him into a Black Worm. But if you can reliably do it, he seems pretty good. A thing that I was wondering, which I'm not sure about, and I probably should have checked this out earlier, but I'm not sure if, like the Enhance mechanic, you have the option to not use his effect. So can I just, if I have 6 play points, can I play this guy as a Mysterian Wormist without transforming him into a White Worm or a Black Worm? I believe the answer is probably no. And if that's the case, then this guy probably won't see that much play. If you can just play him as a 2/2 and don't necessarily have to turn him into anything, he will most likely see play in Burn Rune. But if you don't have that option, then I don't think there's going to be that many homes for this guy. Unlike Celia, sadly, his transformed forms are pretty good, but his non-transformed form just in the deck that he would go in is not as valued. So a 2 play point 2/2 commander is pretty good in Sword. However, a 2 play point 2/2 vanilla guy is not as great in Burn Rune, which has, for example, the Illusionists, which would be a much better play on that same turn. And they are kind of tight when it comes to play points. So pretty interesting card. I think it'll most likely see play somewhere, but not sure exactly where. Have to get confirmation on that choose thing to kind of make a call on it. Staff of Whirlwinds, deal 3 damage to an enemy follower, then deal 1 damage to all enemies. This seems pretty good as a card. Does seem somewhat expensive though. I'm not sure. Does Burn Rune want to run this card? Do they want to spend 5 mana to deal 1 to your face and remove a follower? I'm thinking probably not. I'm going to go with probably not. It's a pretty good arena card, but I'm not sure it'll see much constructed play, simply because I think we have enough burn cards to kind of make this obsolete. Moonshade Mage. So 4 mana 1/4, Fanfare, he becomes a 2/4. And Spell Boost, he becomes more than a 2/4. So this is a new version of, I forgot what it's called, the Corset Runecraft guy who got +1/+1 for each spell boost. He was a 1/1 and he spell boost +1/+1 every time. I forgot what it was called. He became huge. Got killed by him a couple of times back in the day, but I don't think he was good enough to see play after a while, and this guy just seems worse than that. So I'm not so sure this guy will see play either. Just feels very slow. It might find a place in the Spell Boost deck. However, I'm kind of skeptical. Witch of Foresight. She gives you a random spell from your deck, and it puts it into your hand. 2 mana 1/2. This seems great. Cheap follower gives you extra cards. It gives you a specific kind of card, so you can kind of tweak your deck around it. This seems great. I mean, I don't see any reason why every Runecraft deck, which runs a bunch of spells, would not run 3 of these. Just seems very efficient. Beast-Faced Mage. So, Clash, he gives you an Earth Essence into your hand. So this is the attempt to assist Earthright Rune, I suppose. Giving them another card which can repeatedly produce Earth Essences. I suppose this isn't bad in Burn as well, if Burn still has a use for Earth Essences, but I don't think there's a especially big use for Earth Essences, like over the ones they're already playing. He's pretty good. I'm going to say he's pretty good, but I'm not sure where he'll find a home because Earthright Rune is non-existent, and I don't think Burn Rune wants this guy as well, because I don't think they have the space for this kind of guy. Okay, we're on to Dragoncraft. Lindworm. 10 mana, 10/10. Okay. Very Dragoncraft card. If you've played at least 10 other non-follower cards this match, and you have 10 play points, which I assume you do because you're playing the Lindworm, whatever, choose play this card as a Virtuous Lindworm or an Iniquitous Lindworm? I'm not sure what that word means. So let's see what those are. So one of them gives you Super Sybil. So heals you for 5 and then draws you 5. Wow, that's pretty impressive actually. And the other guy is a 10/10 Stormer that ignores Ward and can only attack face. Well, this card seems pretty good. I'm pretty sure this card would have been absolutely crazy if it did not have this condition right here. And in fact, that is why the condition is there. 10 other non-follower cards. So, Draconic Fervors, Dragon Oracles, Breathless Salamanders, Blazing Breaths. That's about 10, but you would have to play all of them. Interesting. I think that this card is actually really strong, and I think it'll see play. I think maybe the Dragoncraft builds, which currently are around, will evolve to basically be centered around this card, because a 10/10 with Storm that ignores Ward seems pretty damn good. And even if you're going for a slower game, this guy just basically wins out the control matchup. So I think that not only will Dragoncraft decks run this card, I think that they will adapt their decks to have an easier time activating his effect, because it seems very, very good. Definitely look out for this card. Don't want to get 10 damage to your face. Not that you can prevent it in any way, but, you know. Dragon. Jerva of Draconic Mail. Change your leader's maximum defense to 10. Oh, are you going to become a dragon? Give your leader the following effect. At the end of your turn, deal 5 damage to a random enemy follower. If no enemy followers in play, deal 5 damage to the enemy leader instead. Not stackable, lasts forever. So you become a dragon. This is somewhat reminiscent of a Magic the Gathering card, which is called Form of the Dragon, ironically enough. However, that card is a bit better than this. Still, very interesting effect. Not stackable. And she is a 9 mana or a 9 play point 5/5, which is horrendous. Your defense gets reduced immediately. At the end of your turn, you get to shoot 5 at an enemy follower. So if your opponent has a weak board, this might not be bad, but this just seems like a very risky card, and the effect is not stackable. If you could play Loki and stack this effect, maybe, but as it is, I mean, it looks very interesting, and I would love to see a deck that centers around this card, but I don't think it can be that competitive simply because it feels too slow. If, like, half the decks I'm thinking of, if you reduce your maximum defense to 10, even if you're shooting out a fireball every end of your turn, they're still just going to kill you. I mean, this doesn't stop them from killing you. It doesn't give you any kind of protection. That Form of the Dragon card I mentioned, it made creatures without a specific keyword unable to attack you. So without flying, they couldn't attack you. And this doesn't have that clause. Everybody can just attack you just fine. I mean, this guy right here, he can just kill you straight up if you become a dragon through this girl. So yeah, no, I'm not seeing it. I think this might be the Trap Legendary. It looks very interesting, but I don't think there's a tier 1 deck to be had here. Still very interesting though. Would love to play a meme deck with this. Dragon Cleaver Roy. So we can either get a Dragon Life Blade or a Dragon Strife Blade. Alrighty, so 3 play points, 2/2. Not bad already. So Dragon Life Blade gives us an empty play point. Oh, okay, we're sold. Sold. Okay, this guy's going to be 3 of every Dragoncraft deck forever. Congratulations. A card that gives you Dragon Oracle. Just sold. I don't even think I need to look at what Dragon Strife Blade does. But I will. 3 to enemy follower. If that follows Dragoncraft follower, deals 6 damage instead. So, the only time I'm seeing this guy actually give you Dragon Strife Blade is when you're already at 10 play points. Or 9, whatever. This guy is incredible. I think that he is basically going to be an absolute staple. I don't see any reason that Dragoncraft decks would not run this guy in triplicate in every goddamn deck. He just gives you Dragon Oracle, which is, I think, pretty objectively, literally the best Dragoncraft card. So, yes, it doesn't draw you a card when you're in Overflow, but that's not the reason you play Dragon Oracle. So, yeah, amazing card. We'll see play in pretty much every deck. The fact that, just as to mention this, the fact that he also has an alternative mode for when you are not, you don't want Dragon Life Blade is just icing on the cake at this point. And Dragon Strife Blade, it's not bad as well. So, even more icing. Force of the Dragonute. Deal 1 to all enemies. So the same effect as that one dragon that comes down and deals 1 to all enemies. Enhance 5, deal 2 damage instead. Well, this seems pretty interesting, but if you have 5 play points, wouldn't you rather play one of the other board wipes? Or rather one of the other board control cards? So for 6 you can play a Breath to Salamander, which is just pretty much objectively better than this. I don't think the 1 damage for 3 is that good as to necessitate running this card. It's an interesting card and it's not bad, but I just think there are better options for pretty much every deck. So I don't think this will actually see that much play. Galua of 2 breaths. So you can either get a white breath or a black breath. Alright. So the white breath gives you cards, and the black breath destroys an enemy follower or amulet. Not bad. Especially since you can play the black breath on the same turn that you play this if you're at 9. Pretty decent. This is actually pretty cool. Again, choose card, very flexible, so that pretty much... It doesn't guarantee it a spot somewhere, but if there is a want for one of these 2 effects, then he will definitely be ran just because he gives you the option to not only get the effect that you want, but also a secondary effect just in case you're in a different kind of situation. I don't think there's a spot for this guy in current Dragoncraft decks. However, he's not a bad card at all. He's pretty decent, I think, but just I don't think there's a spot in current Dragoncraft decks. However, again, if there ever is a need for one of these 2 effects, then he will definitely be ran. His body's somewhat too bad, though. Sad. Heroic Dragon Slayer. Transform a Dragoncraft card in your hand into a Dragon's Hand Spur. Well, let's see what that is. So a Dragon's Hand Spur is a 4 play point, deal 3 damage to an enemy, draw a card if Overflow is active for you. That's not great. I mean, this doesn't seem terribly bad, but it doesn't seem good either. I'm gonna say that probably not good enough. Just his body's not... If the stats were the other way around, maybe. But as it stands, he's like an aggressive minion that gives you a card which is more control-centric, so it doesn't really make too much sense in that situation. So, no, I'm gonna say this guy is pretty meh. Waters of the Orca. Get a Megalorca. Get more, get more, get more, and get more. So, I suppose that... So, first off, typical Dragoncraft decks, current meta decks, I don't see any reason to run this card. However, I do believe there was a... Well, not an actual competitive version, but I do believe there was a Megalorca deck in the past. And there are a couple of cards which interact with Megalorcas, so perhaps this card will make that archetype a thing, which is not tier 9000, but rather tier 3, maybe. So, pretty cool addition. I like that they're adding this card because it kind of bolsters an archetype that isn't like really fleshed out. So, pretty cool. In terms of actually seeing this card played against you, probably not, unless you're playing against a pretty serious memester. Twilight Dragoon Coda. Can't be attacked. And can't be attacked. So is this budget forte? Sure looks like budget forte. Like a really budget forte. I'm gonna go with no. 6 play points, 2 toughness. Yeah, it can't be attacked, but it can still be killed. So I'm gonna go with pass on this card. Seems pretty bad. Interesting in Arena though. Drakewing Assassin. Rush whenever you play a non-follower card. Gain +1 attack. He seems pretty mediocre, I'll be honest. Rush is a pretty good keyword, but he is not very efficient in terms of cost. Dragon kind of passes over the mid-game by using ramp cards, and he's a mid-game card. So I don't think he's going to see much play. He's pretty interesting, but I don't think he's going to see play simply because of his price and his lack of an actual super relevant effect. I don't think Rush is enough. Dragonclad Blade Master. So 3 play points, 2/3. Fanfare gains +1/+1 in Bane if Overflow is active for you. This actually seems pretty interesting. He kind of can remove followers if he sticks on the board for a turn or if you evolve him, but isn't Dragoon Scyther just a million times better than this? Yeah, I'm gonna say that this guy probably doesn't do what you want him to do simply because he doesn't have Rush, so he needs to be evolved to attack immediately and make use of the Bane. But if you're evolving and, you know, he has to use Bane, it means he's killing something pretty big, which means he's going to die as well. So that was a pretty bad evolve. And if you just keep him on the board without evolving him, most likely he won't survive next turn, so you won't get to make use of his Bane. So seems like a pretty lose-lose situation right here. Gonna go with pass. This guy's probably not good enough. Somniferous White Worm. Oh, another White Worm, eh? Has nothing to do with the previous White Worm, though. So, 2 play points, 2/1, and gives you a Dragon's Nest. Not bad. Dragon's Nest is one of those cards which has been on the fringe of playability for some time. I mean, some people run it, but it's not kind of a universally accepted meta decision. But this guy seems pretty decent. He gives you a free Dragon's Nest. He gives you an early game body to play. I mean, why not? I'm not sure if there's any space in standard ramp decks for this guy, but if there is, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't run him. He doesn't seem bad at all. In fact, he seems pretty good. So yeah, I'm going to say the card's pretty good. And it might see play if there's enough space, but he's not one of those high priority cards that you want to find space for, unlike, for example, that one friend we had at the beginning. You know the one. And the Dragon's Handspur, which is a token. We've already seen this. Not a very good card, Dragon's Handspur, even though it's created. Not a very good card. Right. Moving on to Shadowcraft. We have Hinterland Ghoul. 7 play points, 6/5. Puts 10 skeletons into your hand. Whoa, that's a lot of skeletons. At the end of your turn, deal 6 damage to all enemies if you have at least 30 shadows. So, this is Shadow's new take on Path to Purgatory, is it? A much easier to remove Path to Purgatory, but Path to Purgatory nonetheless. Pretty interesting. Obviously, this guy does not slot into a currently existing deck because, well, he does something that nobody basically wants at this moment. But we might see this guy create a deck archetype of his own, basically the Path to Purgatory archetype, except this guy replaces Path to Purgatory. But I think one of his main problems is that, unlike Path to Purgatory, you can't play multiples of this guy on the same turn, so basically his damage, unless he sticks on the board by some miracle, is capped out at 6 per turn, which is much worse than Path to Purgatory's 12 with 2 amulets. So, not sure how impactful he's going to be, but as it stands, he seems pretty decent, pretty interesting, but there's going to have to be a special deck created for this guy. So I'm not sure if how it's going to work out. I'm going to say it's going to be okay-ish. Don't expect him to be like a tier 1 deck though. Ceridwen, Eternity Hunter. Oh, so she has another version, does she? So she can either give us an Eternal Potion or an Instant Potion. And whenever she attacks, you recover 1 play point. It's a very interesting when you attack effect. Recover a play point. So what's the potion? Reanimate 10. So this is Sow Death Reap Life, I believe. Does the same thing. So this is basically Sow Death Reap Life. And Instant Potion. Deals 2 damage to enemy follower. Barrel Right deals 5 instead. That's actually pretty good. The Instant Potion is pretty good. But her stats are really bad. 6 play points, 4-5 is pretty bad. If you're only getting the Instant Potion, it's probably not worth it. The Eternal Potion? I mean, what deck wants this? I'm thinking maybe in Unlimited you would want to play this in a Nephthys deck. Or something of the sort, a deck which centers around reanimation. However, in rotation, I can't think of anything that you want to particularly bring back with this. Eternal Potion seems like it's not bad, it's pretty good, but you still need to pay it. And it doesn't seem as impactful as it could be if we had, for example, Mordecai the Duelist. And the Instant Potion, it's pretty good, but it's not worth playing this card just for the Instant Potion, I don't think. Like, the main benefit of choose cards is that you get 2 different options, and the most powerful choose cards are those in which both options are pretty good on their own. And here I feel that one option is only good in specific situations, and the other option is decent, but not strong. So, I mean, this is probably going to sound very weird, but I actually think this legendary is pretty meh. Even though she ticks all the checkboxes. Choose card, check. Recovers play points, check. Cute waifu, right there. But I don't think it's enough, somehow. I guess we'll see. Maybe I'm completely wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong, because it feels like a waste of a legendary at the moment. Fickle Resurrector. If you have at least 6 shadows, Necromancy 6, and she summons either a Spellplate Cavalier or a Bone Cavalier. And her evolve evolves all Spellplate Cavaliers and Bone Cavaliers. Okay. So the Spellplate is a Warder, and the Bone is a Drainer with alright stats. Interesting. So let me check. Are the Spellplate Cavaliers or Bone Cavaliers actual collectible cards, or are they only tokens? They are not collectible cards. So if they were collectible cards and you could actually put them in your deck, she would be very interesting, because she would very likely create a deck of her own with this effect. However, as it stands, in order to get more than one Cavalier, you have to play multiple Fickle Resurrectors. Yes, she seems like a pretty good mid-game fighter card, but she is at 7 play points. So if this was a, let's say, a 5 play point card, and she had lower stats, and both of these had lower stats, she would be pretty amazing. Simply because you could evolve her. She evolves the Cavaliers as well, and you have 2 followers with Rush, which can very quickly take over the board. However, at 7 play points, I feel that point for contesting the board seriously has kind of passed. So I'm not so sure this card can find a home in any of the current decks. I don't feel that she's especially needed in any of the current decks, be it mid-range or aggro or even the Dark Alice deck that seems to be wandering around. In general, I feel that this is a pretty good card. It's strong on paper, it's strong on its own. It's probably an amazing arena card, but I feel that in Constructed, this card doesn't really have a home currently, unless the meta shifts to a state where at 7 play points, you still have evolve points left, and you are still contesting the board, and you need something to very seriously contest the board, which this card can do. But I don't think that's the state of the meta right now, and I don't think it will be in this expansion. Everdark Strix. Fanfare Burial Rite. Put a random Shadowcraft follower from your deck into your hand. Whenever you perform Burial Rite, restore 1 defense to your leader. So I assume he works on his own Burial Rite, so he will basically give you 1 defense right away. He actually seems pretty good. This is, I guess, Shadowcraft's take on Goblin Mage. Not exactly the same thing, but it does a similar job. It gives you a card from your deck, so basically this is a draw card for a specific card, and it does have the additional restored defense upside, which it's somewhat minimal, but it does come into play sometimes. So I actually think this card is pretty good. Its stats are somewhat awkward. I think a lot of people would have preferred to see a 2-3 rather than a 3-2. So as it stands, I'm not sure this card is going to have a home. Typically this card will be played, I assume, in either a very specific combo deck. So again, mentioning the Dark Alice deck, if Dark Alice is your only Shadowcraft follower, this can help you fetch her. But I think that the deck that typically wants this kind of effects more is a mid-range deck. So the current Shadowcraft mid-range deck would actually want this effect, but I'm not sure if the body this card has will kind of work for their plans, because they kind of want to put followers on the board which will stay on the board, and I feel that this guy's stats do not allow him to stay on the board for very long. So pretty interesting card. It will probably see some play, but I don't think it'll be massively popular simply because of the awkward stats. Mighty Arm Skeleton. Doesn't look that mighty to me. If you have at least 8 play points, you can play it as a Giant Skull or a Hell Lord Skeleton. Why not a Mightier Arm Skeleton? Shame. Giant Skull is a warder which summons 2 skeletons when it dies. Not bad, I suppose. And a Hell Lord Skeleton, it just deals 3 damage to an enemy. Honestly, the Hell Lord Skeleton actually looks pretty good because it can allow you to contest the board without having to use an evolve point, something that I think is very valuable. However, the Mighty Arm Skeleton on his own has basically no effect outside of this when you have 8 play points. So when you're under 8 play points, this guy has no effect. And the no effect 4 play points for 3, it's probably not good enough. And the Giant Skull, it's not awful, but it's not good either. So basically you have 3 cards here, Mighty Arm, Giant Skull, and Hell Lord, and only one of them is good. Or, well, it's good-ish. So I don't think this guy is going to be run just to spawn Hell Lord. I don't think that's worth it. I think this guy's probably a pass. He's maybe a pretty good arena card because again, it's a choose card. I think all choose cards pretty much are going to be decent in arena, but I don't think he's going to see constructed play, which is kind of sad because look at that Mighty Arm. Big Soul Hunter. Oh, and she has a scythe. Very fancy scythe too. 3 play points, 2/3, Necromancy 6, destroys a random enemy follower with at least 5 attack. So this is Big Game Hunter, except for souls. Okay. This effect is actually very good. I was somewhat skeptical after the Big Arm Skeleton just a second ago, but this effect's actually very good. This card seems exceptionally good. It seems like a replacement for the Soul Squasher card, so kind of a different take on it, but it pretty much does a similar thing where it removes followers without having to evolve. Again, I think a quality which is very important in Shadowverse, being able to play a card and that card contests the board without having to use an evolution point. So I think this card's very good. I'm not sure which decks it'll be played in, but I can pretty much guarantee that this card will be played in high amounts, so we're talking 2 copies or 3 copies, in some deck. I'm thinking that probably most Shadowcraft decks want multiple copies of this card, but I could be wrong. Either way, I think that this card is simply too strong to ignore for all Shadow decks, so somebody's going to be running this for sure. Seems very, very good. Poltergeist. Spooky. We summon 2 ghosts, and we enhance for 4, so that all allied foes in play will be destroyed instead of being banished. So there's 2 sides to this. One of it is you pay the extra play point so that you get 2 shadows, so that this basically reads 4 play points, summon 2 ghosts, gain 2 shadows. or you use the Enhance to counterplay banished cards. Very interesting. I'm not sure any of the current decks has space for this kind of effect, but if deck which is centered around the card which you're really scared of being banished comes around, so kind of like Dark Alice decks becoming more popular, if that happens, perhaps this card will see some play, but as it stands, I don't think this card has a home in anywhere. It's just too specific to have a more wide application. Death, the Nyctophile. Well, that's kind of on the nose. Okay, so Death apparently is a 5 play point 4/4 Baner that gives us 1 shadow. Seems like an okay budget / arena card. Constructed? Probably not. Seems way too vanilla. Real shame too, because, well, it's Death. Oh well. Orator of the Bones. Ooh, very spooky name, and I really like the art on these. Last word, summon a skeleton. Oh, well, that's short and simple, isn't it? I actually think this card is going to be played. Surprisingly enough, this card seems to fit pretty much perfectly in the mid-range / aggro shadow lists. It does pretty much everything they want. It gives you a body that gives you another body. So I'm expecting 3 copies of this to hit pretty much every deck that would typically run Prince Catacomb, which is, I guess, most Shadowcraft decks anyway. So yeah, definitely you're going to be seeing a lot of these 2 little girls, or 1 little girl with 2 different outfits. Either way, you're going to be seeing her a lot. Regenerate Spirit. So 2 play points, reanimate 3. Enhance 8, then reanimate 5. So you either have a 2 play point reanimate 3, which is pretty good, or you can pay 8 and do reanimate 3 and then reanimate 5. This card seems pretty interesting in the sense that it feels like it can do a lot of things. I'm not sure if anybody has space for it. It feels like it'll be very useful in a mid-range / aggro shadow list where you're going to basically be reanimating some cheap things just to gain extra shadows. However, I'm not sure that those kinds of decks have space for a card which is somewhat low value by itself, because all this card does is reanimate. It doesn't have an additional effect, and the Enhance 8 I don't think is that powerful. Maybe I'm missing some very particularly priced cards here, but I don't think this card is especially noteworthy. It's interesting to have though, and probably somebody will figure out an interesting deck with this, but nothing special. Mischievous Spirit. 1 play point 1/1. And Necromancy 3, he summons a ghost. 1 play point followers, always great in aggro, regardless of what they do. This guy gives you an extra body, potentially gives you 1 extra ping damage. Probably will get played in aggro, or maybe will get played in aggro. I'm not sure if the aggro lists still run Goblin, but if they do, perhaps this will replace Goblin. If they don't, I'm not sure that they have space for this kind of card. So yeah, the card's pretty okay on its own, but it's basically a only aggro card, and a very cookie cutter one at that. And we're on to Bloodcraft. Dark Feast Bat. So deals X damage to an enemy, and X is the number of times that your leader was damaged during your turn in this match. So this seems somewhat flexible. You can use it to either kill off a big minion or just take control of the board, although I did mention that at this point, turn 7, kind of fighting for the board, I do feel that it's kind of late. More importantly, this can be used to finish off your opponent, so deal a certain amount of damage to his face. So I'm guessing 3 or 4 is pretty realistic. Probably can get more if you try to build around it, but in an average deck, 3 or 4 is pretty realistic. This card seems pretty okay. If there is, I mean, I haven't seen the rest of the Bloodcraft cards, but if there are other cards which repeatedly deal damage to you, something like Blood-Fed Flower Bed or something of the sort in this set, then this might actually become a pretty great finisher for Bloodcraft. The card seems pretty okay, but it does feel a little bit like you have to build around it. I'm not sure if getting 3 or 4 damage out of it is quite enough to justify running it, especially since it's a legendary. I think you kind of maybe want to build around it to get 7, 8 or so damage out of it. So use this as a really decent finisher, much akin to Saphir Synthetic Beast for Portalcraft. So we'll see. This will probably be run, although again I don't think Bloodcraft has a existing archetype which kind of wants this card. Maybe a new archetype, a new Vengeance archetype will arise that is centered around actually using this card and maximizing the damage they can get from it. Actually seems pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what decks this spawns. Vania, Nightshade Vampire. Well, this is one of the cards that I actually had heard about. There was a lot of talk about this card. I still don't know what she does, but let's find out. So, if you have at least 6 play points and Vengeance is active, she can either be a Kind Queen Vania or a Blood Queen Vania. Alright, let's check them out. So, Kind Queen Vania has Drain, summons a bat, and gives ward to bats. And Blood Queen Vania has Storm and gives bats Bane. Interesting. These actually seem pretty okay. Oh, the base version also deals 2 damage to both leaders and summons a forest bat. So you're definitely going to have 1 bat up when you play this. I actually don't think she is as spectacular as I was first led to believe. She seems pretty decent, but again, it's 6 play points, and again, with Bloodcraft not being in such a good state, this card is okay, but I don't think it's going to push Bloodcraft to like become better. Not by much anyway. Yeah, she is very flexible. There's a plethora of keywords here. There's Storm, Bane, Drain, Ward. I mean, she gives it all, but I'm just not seeing it. I think she's probably going to be played, but I don't think that she's going to have that big of an impact. I don't think she's going to single-handedly bring blood out of the proverbial dumpster that they're in rotation. Good to see more Vania cards, though. Definitely approve. Old Blood King. Ambush. Oh, my favorite keyword. Whenever an allied forest bat comes into play, you give it 1 attack and Storm. Oh, I don't like this card. I'm getting Angelic Slacker PTSD, except worse. So this guy is basically Fairy Driver with Ambush, but he works for bats. I'm not sure how I feel about this. I think that this card can be very strong, and it'll probably be very strong, and it is definitely one way to boost Bloodcraft's performance. However, I really dislike ambush cards or cards which give repeatable Storm. So this guy is pretty much everything I hate encapsulated in one card, and I just wish he did not exist. Honestly, when it comes out, probably, since Bloodcraft is somewhat behind, once again, probably he's going to be an absolute dumpster fire because everybody else is going to be so much more powerful, and all Bloodcraft's going to have is this guy. But I still dislike these kinds of effects being in the game in general. So I'm going to say that this guy will probably see play, but I really, really wish that he doesn't. Gift for Bloodkin. Oh, a 0 play point card. Okay. Deals 1 damage to both leaders and summons a forest bath for both leaders. So I guess this works under the presumption that you can make better use of a forest bat than your opponent because you have things which interact with forest bats. So I suppose you could theoretically have Old Blood King and then play Gift for Bloodkin and give your forest bats Storm. It's a very interesting card. I'm not sure exactly where it fits in the grand scheme of things, but it's pretty interesting. If nothing else, it's a 0 play point card, which is kind of rare these days because, well, 0 play point cards are scary, but it's pretty interesting. Not super sure what deck wants this other than the Old Blood King Stormbats deck, which will inevitably be built. Still, interesting card. Looking forward to seeing where it goes. Silver Chain Disciple. Deal 1 damage to both leaders and 2 damage to a random enemy follower if Vengeance is active for you. Not bad, not great. Probably won't see constructed play simply because it is just not impactful enough. But hey, I could be wrong. Seems like a pretty decent follower regardless, but probably not good enough. Buller, Blood Maiden. If you have at least 5 play points, you can play her as Buller Saintly Maiden or Buller Dark Maiden. Alright. So, Saintly Maiden has Ward and restores defense to your leader. And Dark Maiden has... oh, she has nothing. She just gives 1 attack to all other allied followers. I'm gonna go with no. She's perhaps playable simply because she's a 1 play point follower, and those are, once again, kind of judged on a different scale. But again, we have a similar situation as that other card where we have 3 options here, and it feels like only one of those options is decent. So I don't think this card can make it. Yeah, I don't think the Dark Maiden is good enough, and she herself, other than being a 1 play point follower, she has no other redeeming qualities. The Saintly Maiden is okay, but she's not great either, so I'm just gonna say no, this card's probably not gonna see play, not in Constructed anyway. Or, well, unless, this pretty much goes for all the other ones as well, unless somebody finds some wacky combo or way to abuse the effect, which is not obvious by just looking at the card itself. Yeah, I'm gonna say this is probably not gonna see play. Shame, it's a nice art. Red Talon Strike. Give an allied follower +1 attack until the end of your turn. Summon a Forest Bat if it's a Bloodcraft follower. So more cards which spawn bats. This is probably going to go into the same deck as the Old Blood King. I think that's pretty much all there is to say. I don't think that a non-Forest Bat-centric deck really cares about a +1 attack buff. So this is probably going to go in a deck which centers around Forest Bats, and that deck is probably going to be the Old Blood King deck. Which I hope it's not. I hope it doesn't exist. Calamity's Archdemon. 9 play points, 7/7. And he deals 4 to both leaders. I mean, I guess that's not bad. You could use it for a finisher, but I'm probably going to go with no. This feels like an arena card. He's way too late. His stats are way too crappy. Yeah, the 4 damage can kill your opponent, but you might be in vengeance yourself. You might kill yourself with this, so I'm going to say no. Probably he's not going to see constructed play. Delirious Demon. Oh boy, this guy has a lot of text for a bronze. Whenever this follower attacks, deal 1 damage to all enemy followers and your leader. Interesting. Enhanced 7, he gains 1 toughness and deals 1 additional damage to all enemy followers and your leader whenever this follower attacks. So basically this guy, whenever he attacks, he pings your face and all the opponent's followers for 1. And if you enhance them, he pings for 2. Which actually is pretty good. I'm not sure if there's a deck which would want to play this kind of card, but if there is a more control-ish type of deck, in rotation that is, if there's a more control-ish type of deck that needs some more board control cards, this is actually not bad. 2 damage to all enemies repeatedly just seems very, very good. For a bronze card, this guy is very surprisingly powerful. Again, not sure we'll see play, but it's a pretty good card nevertheless. Nightmare Devil. Fanfare and last words. Summon a Forest Bat. Need I say more? The Forest Bat deck. The card's not awful. It summons 2 Forest Bats, which I'm pretty sure is good enough. If we consider that each Forest Bat is worth 1 play point, and her body is worth 1 play point, that's exactly 3 play points, so there you go. Easy math. Needless to say, she will see play if the Forest Bat deck is a thing, which I'm pretty sure it will be. Summon Bloodkin. Hey, I've seen this card before. Are they doing like a reprint or something? Either way, this is a good card, and yeah, we'll go in the same deck as the last 50 Forest Bat cards we mentioned. Same deck, same thing, same idea. Yes, we get it side games. You want to push Forest Bats. We got it. And we're on to Havencraft. Godsworn Alexiel. So 8 play point 5/5. Okay, it's going to have a pretty decent effect, I assume. Ward. Give your leader the following effect. If an allied amulet is in play, your leader cannot take more than 4 damage at a time. So this is basically Haven's Durandal. I'm not sure how much Haven actually requires this effect, but it seems pretty interesting. I do believe a lot of Havencraft decks are running Summit Temple, so that would be the amulet which would be in play to activate this effect. And she herself has Ward, so she's not absolutely terrible on the turn you play her, because she kind of protects you. They have to get rid of her to hit you. So, pretty interesting. Not sure it'll see play, because I'm not sure current Havencraft decks have space or the need for this kind of effect, but she's pretty strong. So if the meta evolves into a state where you're getting one turn killed by that one Dragoncraft legendary, for example, this will probably see play. So, pretty interesting card. Serenean Hind? Oh god, how do you pronounce this? Serenean Hind? I'm not sure. If at least 2 allied amulets are in play and you have at least 5 play points, choose. You can either play him as a light hind or a dark hind. And whenever he attacks, put a random amulet from your deck into your hand. So getting amulets from your deck and putting them into your hand is already a pretty decent effect. So let's see what these other versions do. So this one has Rush and restores defense, which is pretty good, dare I say. And the Dark Hind has Bane and subtracts countdown from amulets. Oh yeah, this guy seems pretty good. Yeah, I'm going to say that this guy is probably going to see play. I'm not sure if a more amulet-centric Havencraft deck is in the meta right now. I don't believe so. But if amulet-centric deck kind of becomes a thing, then this guy will definitely see play in that deck, because pretty much all 3 of his versions are pretty good. This guy helps you play out your amulet effects. This guy kind of gets you back in the game if you're falling behind. And this guy just gets you amulets. So it just seems like this card does quite a lot for that specific archetype. So definitely think this is a very good card and will see play if there is a deck in which it can be played. Tenko's Shrine. Whenever you restore defense to an ally, deal 2 damage to a random enemy follower. If there are no enemy followers in play, deal 2 damage to the enemy leader instead. So this is, I suppose, a replacement for Elana's, since it kind of would be played in the same spot as Elana's would be played. It's interesting. It might actually spawn a deck around it. So basically Elana's, but now it's Shrine, or Tenko's, or whatever you want to call it. Not really looking forward to hearing "You're fine now" over and over again, but regardless, I think this card is pretty interesting and it might see play in a new archetype. New archetypes are always exciting, so I'm gonna give it a thumbs up regardless of my dislike for the card which it centers around. Jeweled Priestess. So she gives you either a white diamond or a black diamond. So first off, she is a 2 play point 1/2, which gives you a card. So these cards have to be pretty crappy not to make this card very good already. So white diamond gives you cards after 2 turns, and black diamond deals damage to the opponent's face and healing to your face. So black diamond not very good, but white diamond very good. Draw 2 cards for 1 after 2 turns, admittedly, but still, this is very good. Yeah, this card, Jeweled Priestess, excellent, excellent card. I think that, in fact, probably most Havencraft decks are going to play this card. I don't see any reason not to play this card. She has an okay body for her cost. 1/2 is pretty okay for 2 play points. And even if you pick only white diamond every single time, like if this card just said, put a white diamond into your hand, it would still be really good. The black diamond is pretty much just icing, but I think that you will be picking white diamond almost every time. Gives you an extra amulet if you need to activate some effects, like the previous card we saw, but definitely think this card will see play. Definitely see this card as pretty powerful, and pretty sure it will see extensive play. Just, it feels so efficient. Opposing Statues. So we can summon either a Holy Fowl of Ivory or a Hexed Fowl of Ebon. And after 2 turns, we return opposing statues to our hand if we have 3 cards or less. Okay, let's see what the birds do. So the Holy Fowl restores defense to you, and the Hexed Fowl has Storm. Initial thoughts, this card will definitely see play, simply because the Hexed Fowl has Storm, and this is very key to decks like Storm Havencraft, which, while they might not be as popular now, used to very much be a thing in the past. The Holy Fowl is also not bad. I'm not sure exactly which deck will be running this. I assume that if there is a dedicated Stormhaven build, it'll be running this card. However, if there isn't a Stormhaven build, then I'm not sure who will want to run this card, but it seems like a really good card regardless. This is very much the Chain Lightning of Stormhaven. So recyclable, repeatable damage. Peace Weaver. Ward. Oh, but you have the stats backwards for Ward. Okay. And she gives you a Holy Lion Crystal. So what is a Holy Lion Crystal? Let's find out. This is actually a collectible card as well. You can actually put this in your deck. Okay. So the Holy Lion Crystal summons a Holy Shield Lion. Okay. Guess we have to check what a Holy Shield Lion is now. Okay. It's this guy. So it summons a 2/2. Okay. If you've played 3 to 5 other Holy Lion Crystals this match, summon a Holy Plate Lion instead. So I assume just a bigger one. Yes. And if you've played at least 6 other Holy Lion Crystals, summon a Holy King Lion instead. And for enhance 5, you can put a Holy Lion Crystal into your hand. So for 5, you can play it again. What does the King do? Storm. This seems like a very involved process. So you have to play multiple 2 play points, summon a 2/2 guy with no effect. After you play enough, it becomes a 2 play point, summon a 4/4 guy. And after you play basically almost all of them that you could possibly have, unless you're using the enhance effect, you get the Holy Lion King, which is great. For 2 play points, if you can get multiple Holy Lion Kings, that's great. But this seems so contrived. Honest opinion, I don't think that this whole thing is going to work. I think it's way too slow. I mean, it looks very interesting, and I'm happy that they're experimenting with something along these lines. A series of cards which have to be played with each other and generate progressively better effects. Although, some bad memories from Jades in that other game. However, I find it pretty interesting that they're experimenting with this, but I don't think that this is efficient enough. I think that this is a bit too tame. And since the Holy Lion Crystal was pretty bad, I think Peace Weaver is bad as well. In general, I think that she was going to be bad simply because she's a 3 play point 3/2 ward instead of a 2/3 ward, which would be what we kind of want. So I'm going to say that both the Peace Weaver and the whole idea of the Holy Lion Crystal and these guys is probably simply not good enough for Constructed right now. Temple of the Holy Lion. Okay. So this, just as I said that, this actually helps out the Holy Lion Crystal thing. And the most important part here is right here, where you get play points back for playing the crystals. However, I still feel that perhaps the whole thing is a bit too slow, even with an additional card. I mean, I say that, and then all 3 of these cards are going to do the same thing, but I still think it's far too slow, even with the Temple. The Temple helps immensely by reducing the play point cost, basically, but I still feel that it is too slow, requires too many cards, and the end result is just not good enough, considering you need multiples of it to kind of recoup your losses. Lycaon, I'm not sure. Deals damage to an enemy if there are at least 2 amulets in your hand. Not bad. I can actually imagine a world where this guy actually sees some play. So his stats are pretty bad. 5 play point, 5/4 is pretty bad. However, he deals damage to an enemy, so you can use this as a finisher to ping your opponent down or to just take control of the board. If the Havencraft Storm deck is a thing, then this guy might see play in it. If just an amulet heavy deck is a thing, then this might see play. So you can kind of easily get additional amulets by utilizing cards like the Jeweled Priestess we saw before. So maybe. Again, if an amulet-centric Havencraft deck or a Storm-centric Havencraft deck exists, this guy might actually have a spot in there just for his versatility and being able to both contest the board with his damage and deal the damage to the opponent's face to finish him off. Death Scythe Nun. Gain Bane during the opponent's turn. So this is I forgot the name, but the Shadowcraft card, the ghost that has Bane. This is basically that. except with the Havencraft twist of only on the opponent's turn. This art actually really reminds me of a character from Guilty Gear. But that aside, the card seems not bad, but giving your opponent control of the Bane when the card does not have something to force him to attack into it, like Ward, I don't think it's good enough. Like, the reason Cleric Lancer used to be so good, or used to be decent, was because it had Ward. So even though it was only powerful during your opponent's turn, they had no choice but to attack into it or use removal. For this girl, they can just ignore her. I mean, you dealing 2 damage to them every turn is, I don't think, enough incentive for them to risk running a big follower into her. They can just run a small follower into her as well. It just feels like you have no control over the effect, which I think is bad when the effect is so specific as Bane. So probably not good enough. Moray Encomium. God, what is with these strange names? So it's an amulet. It draws you a card, and then it destroys a random enemy follower. So isn't this a better version of that one other amulet, which also destroys a random enemy follower, but does not draw you a card? Yeah, pretty sure it is. Anyway, this card seems pretty good. I can't see any reason for pretty much every Havencraft deck not to run maximum or 2 copies of this card. It cycles, it only costs 2 play points, it cycles, it guarantees destruction of an enemy follower. The opponent has to kind of play around it because they can just get destroyed by RNG if they have a big follower. Just, this card seems phenomenal. I mean, it's a bronze and it just seems so powerful and so undercosted. So, definitely gonna see play. Probably in every deck. So, probably gonna have a lot of opportunities to learn how it's pronounced. Okay, we already talked about the Holy Lion Crystal and the whole idea of these lions. Again, don't think they're good enough. It just seems too slow. Okay, moving on to Portalcraft. First card, we have Orcus, Puppet Girl. So 8 play point 5/5. If you have at least 2 puppets in your hand and 8 play points, she can be either a resolute puppet or a vengeful puppet. And she also gives you 3 puppets. So what do her versions do? So wait, we need 2 puppets in our hand to activate. That's not very difficult. So whenever an allied puppet comes into play, transform it into Lloyd the Android. If there isn't an allied Lloyd the Android. At the end of your turn, restore 3 defense to your leader if there's an allied Lloyd the Android. I mean, I don't know what Lloyd the Android is, but this sounds pretty good. So Vengeful Puppet, whenever an allied puppet comes into play, transform it into a Marionette Uno if there isn't an allied Marionette Uno, and transform it into a Marionette Due if there is an allied Uno in play. Interesting. So let's check out these cards. So it was Marionette Uno and Due, and Lloyd the Android. Let's check out these cards. They could have put the tokens somewhere more convenient, though. Oh, what's this? So Lloyd the Android. Ward, if this follower can be targeted, your enemy can only target this follower. That is pretty good. That is pretty good. Okay, let's see what the marionettes do. Oh, this one just has ambush. Okay. And this one has Storm. And at every turn, this follower combines with an allied Uno to become Tre. And Tre is Storm can attack twice with a Storm? Interesting. And last words, it disassembles into Uno and Due. Okay, so let's go back to the... So was this at turn start? Yes, start of your turn, so much like Medusiana. Okay, so this card has a lot of text and a lot of cards associated with it. So the base version, we have an 8 play point 5/5, right? If we don't have 2 puppets, we get 3 puppets. So 8 play points 5/5, we get 3 puppets. That's okay. That's not terrible. It's not good, but it's not the worst. Okay, if we get the Resolute Puppet, so we get a 5/6, and if we play a puppet, we get a Lloyd the Android. And we restore 3 defense if there's an allied Lloyd the Android. That seems pretty good. We get a 5/6, a 1/4 ward, which protects all our other guys. She restores defense. All of these seem pretty decent. So as for the Vengeful Puppet, we get 8 play points, we get a 6/5. And when we play puppets, they become uno and due. And if our opponent kind of ignores them, they become tre, which is basically a win condition. Very interesting. This card, I think, is very hard to judge without actually playing with it, simply because it has so many parts to its effect. And it requires a lot of moving pieces. Basically, how powerful these two versions of the card are depend very strongly on how many puppets you have in hand. So especially for this one, it's very important to have more puppets. And for this one, if you can just keep playing Lloyd the Android and your opponent doesn't have the damage to break through more than one Lloyd the Android, then it can be very powerful as well. Restoring defense is also something that Portalcraft doesn't really have that much of, but kind of needs. So I feel that while this card is somewhat hard to judge, my gut reaction is that she's probably going to be at least reasonably good, if nothing else, because she does help out an archetype that is not as well developed. And honestly, I think that they might have somewhat overcompensated by giving her so many various effects, some of which seem very powerful. The Marionette Due and Marionette Tre seem very, very powerful. So I'm going to say strong card, we'll probably see play. Not sure how good the archetype is going to be even with her, but it's definitely something that you should watch out for. That which erases, much like that which betrays. Interesting. So whenever a card is put into your deck, banish a random enemy follower or amulet. So this effect is very powerful, obviously, because most of the cards which put cards into your deck, they put 2 cards into your deck. So realistically, if you play him and you play a card which puts 2 cards into your deck, then you are going to banish 2 enemy followers or amulets, which is pretty huge. It does say random, so you can get somewhat unlucky, but basically the best situation for him would be you have him, you have an artifact in hand, and you have Biomanufacture in hand. So you play him, you play Biomanufacture, and you banish 3 random enemy followers or amulets, which is pretty powerful. That said, he is a 7 play point 6/4. So the way I think that it'll work is you basically have to get value out of him on the turn you play him, because he will not be alive next turn. His toughness just does not allow him to be alive next turn. In general, in Shadowverse, I feel that followers do not stick around on the board very much, and this guy especially has a huge bullseye painted right on his face. And that 4 toughness, oh man, it is pretty easy to kill this guy. So I think that the only way to get value off this guy is to do so on the turn you play him. And the main way to do so is either through Biomanufacture or by playing him on turn 9 or 10 when you can play a legit card which puts stuff in your deck for 2 play points. Honestly, this guy's probably going to be played quite a bit. However, I'm pretty sure that in time he will maybe drop off the map simply because he requires other cards to do anything, basically. By himself, he is absolutely dreadful. So he requires other cards to do things. So he's a kind of combo card. He has kind of counter synergy with certain cards. So, for example, Deus Ex Machina doesn't really work well with him because you want to have that which erases plus a card which puts other cards into your deck in hand at the same time. And if you've played Deus Ex Machina and you don't have super good control over your resonance, you might end up just discarding either that which erases or all the generators of extra cards. So, I don't know, it just feels somewhat inconsistent. His effect is very, very powerful, but I think somebody's going to have to figure out a way to get more value out of him outside of basically having him and Biomanufacture in hand at the same time. Still, do look out for him because a lot of people will be trying to integrate this into their decks for sure. Because the potential upside, when it works, it's very strong. More often than not, it's not going to work, but when it does, oh boy. So yeah, watch out for that which erases until, well, it gets erased from the deck lists. 2, Murderous Puppet. So he summons a Victoria. And when he evolves, he makes Victoria attack twice per turn. So who is Victoria? Well, it looks like she's a token. She is. And she has Rush, and whenever this follower attacks an enemy follower, deal X damage to the follower before you can do any damage in return. X equals this follower's attack. So that is very good, straight up. Like, this effect is very powerful. Having Rush and 3 attack by default, that is very powerful. So let's go back to the main card. So we are looking at a 7 play point 4/4 that summons a 3/1 Rush that can basically trade favorably in most situations. And if we evolve Zwei, then we get 2, or rather 3 trades possibly, because Victoria can ping off 2 low toughness followers, and Zwei himself can trade into somebody. So it feels like this is yet another one of the cards that is being pushed in this expansion, which seeks to give us mid-game fighter cards, except on a higher cost slot. So we saw a couple of other cards which also cost 7 play points, which also help to contest the board. So I believe the same problem with them applies to this guy, although one thing which I want to check. Okay, she is not a puppet and she is not an artifact. So while I believe that he suffers from the same problem, that is to say turn 7 is kind of late to be contesting the board with these kinds of effects which require an evolution point, I do feel that he is somewhat significantly better than the other ones, just because Victoria, without an evolve point, can already gain you board advantage. So out of all of the cards we've seen so far, which are at the 7 play point cost and fight for the board, I think that this one is the best one. Still, I'm not sure if he'll see super much play, but people will be testing him out for sure, because on paper he seems pretty good. He might actually find a home somewhere, but I don't think it's going to be a 3 of. He's probably going to be a 1 or 2 of if he is played. Portalcraft somewhat depends on consistency, and again, this kind of effect is, the need for this kind of effect is somewhat niche at this price range. Devil of the Gaps. So she gives us either a Blade of Light or a Blade of Dark. The Blade of Light makes somebody beefy, weak, and protective. And the Blade of Dark makes somebody strong and removes all effects. So this is a one-time removal of all effects on him. I'm not sure this card is quite as useful as it might initially appear. So first off, we have the ever dreadful 3 play point, 3 attack, 2 defense spread, which again is worse. However, the blades, while they seem somewhat specific, they are actually way more flexible than it might first appear. The Blade of Dark can actually be used on an opponent's follower to remove beneficial effects, and the Blade of Light can be used in the same way. It can give ward to a follower which is hiding behind wards in order to enable you to kill him off. So both of these blades can be used both offensively and defensively. So on your followers and on their followers. So she does look very flexible, so that might actually get her a spot in some decks. I'm not exactly sure what deck wants to run her. Yes, these cards are very flexible and they allow a lot of things, but I feel that these are cards which kind of seek to counter a certain strategy or a certain deck, and I'm not sure which popular deck currently exists which is countered by these cards. So I think this card is going to be a very good tech choice, but probably won't be in Portalcraft decks, let's say day 1 when the meta is kind of unknown. Still, she is pretty good on paper, so probably we'll see play. Dirk, Steel Arm Battler. So he has Rush, and he puts a random artifact card that costs 3 play points from your deck into your hand. So at least 3 play points. So that is the Ward artifact and the Storm artifact. The other 2 cost 1. Interesting. He does have very low toughness, which basically means that whatever he rushes into, he's going to die from it. I'm not sure if his effect of giving you those one of those 2 artifacts, if you're even running them, because they are kind of the less popular ones. I'm not sure if that is enough to justify his somewhat inefficient body. Rush is always good, but I'm not so sure. I think that this guy's spot is much better taken by Hakrabi, who also costs 5. Not so sure this guy will see play. pretty good to have the option to run him, but I just don't think he's quite there yet. Crystal Cannon. Whenever an artifact follower that originally cost these 3 play points comes into play, so again, we're talking about the Ward and the Storm artifacts. Deal 3 damage to a random enemy follower if no enemy follows in play. So this is high cost artifact support cannon. I guess they're trying to maybe build a new archetype of artifacts, because currently the 1 cost artifacts are the most popular. The other 2 are somewhat less well regarded. So perhaps this is trying to build on that, but I'm not so sure it'll be able to accomplish that. It doesn't seem that potent. Plus, the main problem with those artifacts, the reason they're not popular, is because they have a high play point cost, and this does nothing to mitigate that. It makes it better when you play them, but you have, let's take the cheaper one, the Ward one. It is, in my opinion, a better one, but the Ward one costs 3 play points. You have to play the Crystal Cannon, which costs 4, and then you have to play the Ward artifact, which costs 3. So that's 7 play points already, and all you're getting out of this is 3 damage to a random enemy follower. Damage you can't control. So yes, it gets progressively better as you play more, but how many more can you play exactly? I think it's just too slow. The fact that you have to pay 4 for the cannon and then still pay the full cost for all the artifacts, in my opinion, is just too slow. If the cannon was cheap, or it made the artifacts cheaper, then yes, perhaps. However, as is, I don't think it's good enough to see any real high-level play. Miriam, Synthetic Being. If you have at least 2 play points and Resonance is active, she can either be a Lange Miriam or La Diablotine Miriam. God, these foreign names, man. So, the Angel Miriam can give you a Radiant artifact and the Prime artifact. So I guess that's a new kind of artifact. And the Devil Miriam can give you a random artifact from your deck into your hand. So let's see what the Prime artifact does. Ah! So it is a very, very expensive artifact. 7 play points, 5/5. At the start of your next turn, summon a Prime artifact. Oh, so this is Mordecai the Artifact, kind of. Significantly less never-ending duel than Mordecai, but it does keep coming back. This actually opens up quite a lot of possibilities. So Crystal Cannon, just going back to it, this does work with Prime Artifact. So my evaluation might have been a bit harsh when I know that Prime Artifact exists, because it coming back will trigger the Crystal Cannon. That said, I do believe you still have to pay for the Prime Artifact, which is 7 play points. Is that correct? Yes, she just puts it into your deck. However, you still have to draw it or pull it out and pay for it. Okay, well, just looking at her, 2 play points, 2/1. Have Resonance active is pretty easy, or well, it will happen at some point. And this one gives you a Radiant artifact and a Prime artifact. The Radiant is the Storm, I believe. So not exactly what you want, but pull a random artifact from your deck and put it into your hand. This is the same effect as the 2/3 follower that costs 3 play points. And basically the only reason that follower is run is because it pulls a random artifact. So I think that Miriam, even though I think that this version, the Angel Miriam, is probably not going to be chosen very often, I still think that she is probably going to see quite a lot of play. In fact, I'm thinking that most decks would actually put her in as a 3-of, simply because she does the same thing as the 2/3 artifact pulling card at lower cost. And the main problem with Portalcraft is consistency and lack of redundancy of their effects. So having another card which kind of does the same thing is going to benefit them immensely. In fact, I think that Portalcraft might actually reduce the numbers on Hakrabi because they will have Miriam Synthetic Being supplementing that 2/3 follower I was mentioning. Cruel Puppet Master. 4 play points, 3/3, clash, puts a puppet into your hand. Not very good. Repeatable puppet generation, but requires combat, requires him to survive to create more than 1. His stats are pretty bad for his price. Gonna go with no. This guy's probably not gonna see constructed play. Junk. Alright. It's a 3 play point, 1/2. And when it comes into play and when it leaves, it gives you a puppet. Okay. well, this is probably good enough to see play in the puppet build. I'm not sure exactly how many puppet generators the puppet build needs in addition to what it already has. However, if they need more, this seems like a very efficient card to give them that. Yes, the stats are pretty abysmal for the cost, but it does give you 2 puppets, which is quite a lot for a single card, considering it is so cheap in terms of play points. So yeah, we'll probably see play in the puppet builds, which are coming because of the legendary, which interacts with puppets. Knower of History. She gives you a prime artifact, well, puts it into your deck, and then pulls a random artifact from your deck into your hand. So I suppose this will be played if there ever is a Crystal Cannon deck, because I did say it is too slow. However, with the existence of prime artifact, it might be slightly better. That said, I think that she may be played in that kind of deck because prime artifact has inherent synergy with Crystal Cannon. But I don't think she's good. I don't think she or prime artifact are good enough to see play in normal Portalcraft decks. Just good stuff Portalcraft, mid-range Portalcraft, whatever you want to call it. Simply because you still need to pay for the prime artifact. It costs 7. It's a 5/5. It's not quite there yet. The evolve effect is actually very valuable. It's the same evolve effect as Icarus, but her fanfare is just not that good. And you kind of want to avoid putting random artifacts into your deck unless they are consistent with your strategy. So one of the reasons that people stopped running the guy that puts in the ward artifact is exactly that. They wanted to ensure that they have almost only the 1-cost artifacts, which are the best ones in terms of solo power level. So this card may see play if there's a Crystal Cannon build. I don't think she'll see play in the good stuff builds / mid-range builds. Rocket Knuckles. Deal 3 damage to an enemy follower. If there are any artifact cards in your hand, randomly discard 1 to deal 6 damage instead. This actually seems like a pretty good removal card. I don't think a lot of Portalcraft players are fine with the idea of discarding artifacts, but 2 play points for 6 damage, maybe they can be convinced. This card seems pretty okay. I'm not sure if it'll be run because, again, discarding artifacts is not good, but if there is a card that discards artifacts and people are willing to run it, probably this will be first on the list, even though, again, I am somewhat skeptical. Personally, I don't think it's going to see much play. Okay, and here we have the tokens we already saw. And going into neutral, we have Marduk, or Marduk, I guess Marduk. Fanfare, give your leader the following effect. Followers can't be played. Oh boy. Whenever you play a spell, draw a card. Whenever you play an amulet, deal 2 damage to the enemy leader. These effects last until his follower leaves the area. This card does a lot and not enough at the same time. The effect is very interesting, but the fact that it only lasts until this follower leaves the area seems actually very bad. Maybe I'm missing some super obvious combo, but this guy looks pretty bad. The deck that I would have initially pegged him for would be the kind of like spell boost heavy deck that runs a lot of spells, like as an alternative addition to that deck. However, the fact that you lose the effect when he leaves play and he himself is just a 7 play point 7/7 that does nothing makes for kind of a hard inclusion. So while an interesting effect to have, I don't think he is particularly good. I don't think he will see much play unless somebody manages to figure out a deck which basically revolves around him and exploits his effect to the maximum. Me? I can't think of that right now. Moon and Sun. Oh look, this is the picture from the logo for the set. So we can either summon an Amaterasu or a Tsukuyomi, and for 7 we can give the follower we summoned +3/+3. So Amaterasu restores 1 defense to our leader when she clashes and puts a Moon and Sun into her hand. And Tsukuyomi deals 1 damage to the enemy leader and puts a Moon and Sun into our hand. So we are paying 3 play points, and we are summoning either a 2/2 or a 3/1, which is not a great deal. The clash effects can kind of be avoided by the opponent, and the fact that it simply gives us back Moon and Sun is interesting, but not especially strong. And we can just keep playing Moon and Sun and keep having followers, but I mean, this I suppose this equates to a better carrot. So they're a follower which, when killed, can just be replayed. So basically like the carrot, except they have a bit more text and are slightly more expensive. Well, slightly, 50% more expensive. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think the carrot has been a major force in the meta forever. So I'm not so sure these will be a major force in the meta either. It's pretty cool that you get like infinite followers you can keep playing over and over again, but I don't know, they don't feel that amazing. Considering this is a legendary card, I'm not sure it is as powerful as it may initially appear. I suppose this does feed decks which require spell casts, so casting Moon and Sun over and over again does give you extra spell casts, so it does give you spell boost or maybe something else which tracks how many spells you cast, but I don't know, I don't think this card is especially noteworthy, which is a shame because the art is really good on both the individual cards and the Moon and Sun card itself. Sad, but I don't think it'll see much play. Perhaps some deck which already used carrots can replace the carrots with this, but I'm not so sure. Still, not a bad card, just not sure where it will fit in. Sutunger, I suppose. So 6 play point 3/2. He has to do something great. He banishes an enemy amulet and he gains +3/+3 if there are no enemy amulets. So he becomes a 6/5 if there are no amulets. This card seems really bad. Assuming there are no amulets, he becomes a 6 mana 6/5, which is not good. It's bad. Definitely bad. And if there are amulets, you're paying 6 play points and getting a 3/2 to banish the amulet. As a comparison, you could be running Fallen from Grace and pay 4 to make the amulet into a shitty angel, and also have Fallen from Grace work against other followers, or you could have this guy. Yeah, I think I'll stick with my Fallen from Grace. In short, I think this guy is pretty bad. I don't think he'll see any play. He is way too specific. Maybe if amulets become a super huge force in the meta and people just need more amulet removal, but I just think Fallen from Grace does this better. And yeah, don't think he'll see play. Paradise Vanguard. So 2 play point, 2/2. No effect. On his normal side, on his evolved side, he banishes an enemy follower with 1 defense. So this is kind of interesting. It does give banish to everybody since it's a neutral card. However, 1 defense, that is kind of specific, and I can think of very few cards that you want to banish in particular. I mean, you always want to have banish because it's just removal, but I can think of very few cards you want to banish instead of destroy in particular. You wanting to banish them so much that you would actually run this card and use an evolution point after specifically reducing them to 1 defense. I mean, it just feels like a tech card and a way too niche tech card. Don't think it's going to see play unless decks like Dark Alice become super prevalent, which I don't think is going to happen. Divine Retribution. So 5 play points, randomly destroys one of the strongest enemy followers in play, or if we pay 8, we deal 3 to the enemy leader in addition. This is actually kind of interesting. I was under the impression that 5 play points already got you a baseline removal, so a card that basically says destroy a follower of your choice. So I wonder why they went with this design, which requires that follower to be the strongest enemy follower. I was fine with 5 just killing anything you want, but it seems Psy weren't. Honestly, I don't think the card is especially good. I think that most people have spent a large portion of their deck building time trying to find ways to get removal for cheaper than 5, and having a baseline removal at 5 again, which is worse than the corset version of the 5 cost removal, just I don't think it inspires a lot of confidence, so I don't think this card will see a lot of play. Not at all. Valkyrie of Order. So we have a 2 play point 2/2 that can be a 5 play point 4/4 or a 8 play point 7/7. Great arena card. and absolutely trash tier constructed card. I have no idea why anybody would run this unless you are constricted by costs in a very awkward way, like the old Neptis decks used to be, in the way that they wanted to have mid-game cards, but they couldn't because of the way Neptis works, so they ran cards like Axe Fighter, which just enhanced into a mid-game card. But I don't think a lot of people have that problem right now, so I think this is a pretty bad card. I don't think anyone's going to play it, which is kind of sad because, well, she's a Valkyrie. It looks pretty cool, but basically all of her forms except the initial one, the 2 play point 2/2, are understated. So, Valkyrie of Chaos. Oh, another Valkyrie. So Fanfare randomly gains Ward or Rush. See, there's a problem in this card. So there's 2 problems in this card, actually. So first one, 3 play point 3/2. That's a problem. Second, this word right here makes the card significantly worse than it could be. If it was a 3 play point 3/2 Rush, that's pretty okay. If it was a 3 play point 3/2 Ward, it'd be pretty garbage. But see, the Rush version is pretty okay. Having the word randomly in there means that you can't rely on it ever being the thing you want. So in those very fringe situations where, you know, you can use like a ward, a 3/2 ward, you can't really force her to be that. And the situations where you need a ward are not the same as when you need a rush, and vice versa. So not being able to control the effect basically makes this card completely useless. Or, well, more useless than its already bad stat line would suggest. So I don't think this card will see any play at all. Tart Man. We have tarts now. Okay. So 2 play points, 2/2, no effect. And when he evolves, he doesn't gain stats, but he returns a random enemy follower to the opponent's hand. See, I don't think this guy's going to see play as well. He evolves to give removal, but there are plenty cards which evolve to give you removal. And he doesn't gain stats. He returns a random enemy follower, so you have to ensure there's only one left to guarantee the effect. And it returns it to hand, doesn't destroy it, doesn't banish it. Maybe this will be a tech card against something which cannot be destroyed or banished, but I'm kind of skeptical as is. This card just looks bad and ridiculous for the sake of being ridiculous. So don't think it'll see any play. Fount of Angels. So 1 play point amulet, countdown 2. It gives 1 power to an allied follower until the end of the turn. And last words, draw a card. This very much feels like an arena card. I don't think it'll see any constructed play. It's just, I think, too weak. Unless the Forestcraft deck, which I mentioned, which relies on buffing followers to gain some kind of benefit, becomes popular and actually needs an additional effect, and they would run this. Barring that, I don't think this will see play in any constructed deck. I just don't see the draw. 1 power is insignificant. Drawing a card is okay, but basically you're just cycling at that point. Yes, 1 play point's not a lot, but I don't see the draw. It can be used as a cheap cantrip, but I don't think it's worth it. And that concludes all the cards from the set. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm crazy and completely undervaluing some card? Let me know in the comments. But for now, I've been Lord, and this has been Shadowverse Dawnbreak Nightedge. Thank you for watching.